Is Landon Duckworth, the four-star quarterback, top dual-threat quarterback in the country, the most important recruit in South Carolina football program's last 5-10 years? And is Shane Beamer on the cusp of landing him? We talk about all that and more. Locked on Gamecocks starts right now.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, guys? Welcome into Locked On Gamecocks. I'm your host, Chris Marler. Hope everyone's having a fantastic start to their weekend and a Friday as we are back in Lexington, South Carolina, recording this show. As you can probably tell, because the internet is a little bit spotty, we are back to our roots. But we have a great show for you nonetheless. Before we get started, I want to say thank you to everyone making Locked On Gamecocks your first listen each and every day. Shout out to our everydayers. Remember, we're a free and available podcast wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, today's episode, we're going to be getting into a little bit of talk about one of the most exciting recruits in the country and what it could mean for South Carolina if they land him. Landon Duckworth, four-star quarterback, top 50 recruit, blue chip passer, also a dual threat guy that has been, at the top of the want list, I think, for quite some time. He was committed last year, decommits, and opens up his recruiting to Auburn. And I think I spoke with several people close to Auburn with some sources we have there the other day. The feeling about this, because he has just announced it's a two-team race now. Two teams, South Carolina or Auburn, are going. One of those two teams is going to land this blue chip quarterback. What I worry about anytime South Carolina gets into the fold with a elite blue chip prospect is one, but it's really only one thing, and it's NIL. Because this is not even from a place of concern or doubt or worry. I mean, it kind of is. It's more so out of a place of ignorance in terms of I don't know what the NIL budget is. I do know that these people that are in charge of it have done a tremendous job. And I think that the NIL stuff is usually something that I think could work against South Carolina when you talk about the teams that they're going up against, like Auburn and Ole Miss, because those two teams and programs have been big spenders in the portal and also with high school recruiting. I don't think it's a problem here with Landon Duckworth. I actually think there's a really good possibility that he comes to South Carolina because of the NIL working in his favor, and we'll talk about why later in the show in the segment. But this is a massive deal to land a kid like this. I don't know if Landon Duckworth is the best quarterback in the country. I don't know if he's as good or better as Lenore Sellers. I do know where he ranks. In terms of where he adds up in not only quarterback rankings, but also 247 Sports on 3, and where he ranks in all of those things as well, okay? I personally think landing Landon Duckworth would be one of the most pivotal and important recruits in this program in the last 5 or 10 years. And I say that by saying this too. There's been a lot of bigger recruits that have panned out better for this school. Nicky Benwari comes to mind. Sellers, obviously, Lenore Sellers comes to mind. Landing 5 stars out of Hammond or schools like that around the state. That's been a big deal as well, right? We've seen all those things happen. Landing a quarterback, for whatever reason, the domino effect that seems to have on other recruits and the bolstering it does to your recruiting class it's something that we've seen over and over and over again. Whether it's right or wrong, or we put too much stock into it, regardless, it always matters. It always matters. And getting a kid like this, who's the number one dual threat quarterback in the country, that's massive. That's a massive, massive deal. Now, you talk about what his what he brings to the table. As a kid, he's a 4-star recruit. Like I said, top 50 nationally. From the state of Alabama, committed to South Carolina in the past, then decommitted. When I spoke to the sources I had at Auburn, we were all in agreement. We all thought he was going to Ole Miss. And it looks like Lane Kiffin got a little bit ahead of his skis and did something that he's done a lot, which is over-recruit at this position specifically, and did so by bringing in 3 guys at the end of the portal in the spring window. And that's what they need for this year's team. That's totally fine, understandable. Not going to sit here and try to be a roster management expert for the Ole Miss Rebels. What I do know is that him now being between South Carolina and Auburn, the feeling around Auburn is that he's not going there. And I don't know what the reasons why. I don't think it's NIL based or NIL, like it's a cause from NIL. But the feeling around Auburn is he's not going there, flat out. I think that bringing him in with the idea that the NIL stuff is important as always, but especially at this position. Having a guy like Lenora Sellers not being around next year and being a guy that gets picked up and goes into the NFL draft, I think that plays in your favor here. Because if it does, then you are sitting here you're able to sit in a situation where you say, like, one, we're able to put kids at this position in the NFL. We've done it 2 times in the last 4 years now with Spencer Rattler and Lenora Sellers. Lenora Sellers probably ended up being a much higher draft pick than Spencer Rattler was. He went in the 5th. I mean, if Lenora Sellers isn't going in the 1st, there's no reason for him not to come back too. But what that also does is shore up the amount of money that was specifically allocated to Lenora Sellers from this university. And I know that on 3, the valuation that they have for him was around $3.7 million. What I was told when he was doing his negotiations, it was around $2.7 million. I know for a fact that Auburn offered him $2 to $2.4 million during the December window of last year. These are all factual things, okay? But you're not going to give obviously all of that to Landon Duckworth. But having that money free up at this position does a lot of things for you. And I don't know if Duckworth is going to be a kid that comes in and would compete right away. I do know that the optics of landing a kid like this, especially with what's going on around it, are huge for Shane Beamer. And that's another reason why I think landing him is one of the biggest recruits that you could bring home to the state of to the program in South Carolina, and make a Gamecock like out of a recruit of this magnitude. I think it's one of the most important players that they would get a commitment from in the last 5 to 10 years. And that may sound crazy because of all the talented kids you've already brought in. Nick Harbor, 5-star kid, right? Maybe you get some of the other 5-stars that you're going after in this year's class alone. But landing Duckworth, right? Landing Landon Duckworth would not only help get those kids, Carter Meadows, the guys like that, to come into the fold and be a part of this class, because great players want to play with great players. But getting him also creates this new narrative. And the new narrative that it creates and the storylines around it that it creates, whether they're completely factual or not, those optics are massive for the program. We're going to talk about what I'm saying next when we come back from this break. And just to allude to what I'm saying is, winning on the field is always going to be the most important thing a coach can do. Recruiting is the next most important thing. And I know that what happened last year when they played Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss on the field, but getting a win over him already on the recruiting trail with this, not to mention several other players that they've already landed in this year's class and could still potentially land later in this year's class, winning that battle and winning a battle against Hugh Freeze does significant things for this program from an optics standpoint. We're going to get back into that when we come back from break. Before we go to break, do want to give a quick shout out to our friends at Monarch Money. You guys have heard me talk about Monarch Money before. It's Friday, it's payday, and there's no one else that should be in your pocket besides your significant other, I'm sure, than Monarch Money. Do you ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place so you can stop just managing your money and start building wealth. They have surprising insights. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at Monarch Money for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. We'll be right back with more Locked On Gamecocks right after this. All right, we're back. We are back in the land of bad internet and so much humidity. I forgot about the humidity. All right, welcome back in. Locked on Gamecocks, Friday show. Want to get back into what I was talking about with Landon Duckworth. So, like I said, let's retrack what we've talked about so far. Duckworth is down to two schools, South Carolina and Auburn. Everyone that I've talked to at Auburn is pretty confident that he is not ending up at Auburn. What this does now, from an optics standpoint, if you're Shane Beamer and company, is a lot. And I feel like I said this a decent amount on the show. Like, this would be huge for blah, blah, blah. And I'm not trying to say this to be embellishing or exaggerative or anything like that. But anytime you land an elite quarterback recruit like that, an elite 11 kid, a top 50 overall player, this is a borderline five-star player. That's a really big deal. And especially at this position, because now you've already got stuff that, like, this is almost like worked inversely, it seems like, where it's like, hey, how do you recruit a star quarterback to your campus? Well, you want to show him you have a proven track record of being able to develop him. You want to make sure he's in a place that he's going to succeed. You want to have enough things around him where he's going to succeed, to have a good OC, play call, all that kind of stuff, and also all the talent around him that's going to be there as well, so he has someone to throw the ball to. You had this situation last year where you went and got a bunch of dudes, like a bunch of elite receivers that now are going to be targets for these future quarterbacks. What this also does, I think, is solidifies South Carolina as having one of the top quarterback rooms in the conference, if not the country, even if Sellers leaves. If Sellers stays and you have him, Cutter Woods, Aaron Nolan, and Landon Duckworth, you could make the case that on paper, from a recruiting standpoint, that's the best and deepest quarterback room in the country. You could easily make that case. I'm not saying that it would be. I'm just saying you could make the case that, like, you're talking about a former 4-star that is now going to be a first-round pick with Sellers most likely. Aaron Nolan, former 5-star. Landon Duckworth, similar rated player. Cutter Woods, I think is awesome. Like, I think he was great in the very limited action we saw from him to start his career at South Carolina in the spring game. But what this also does is now you've won battles on the recruiting battles over Lane Kiffin again, who has been like, listen, like, if you're a quarterback, it's hard to say why you wouldn't want to play for Lane Kiffin. Going into last season, Lane Kiffin, 8 out of his last 11 quarterbacks going into last season, they finished the season with either 3,000 yards passing and or 30 touchdowns. Everyone has success in that system. So to win any player at that position over Lane Kiffin in that Pepper is all up in something in this yard. You're seeing how the sausage is made. What a fun day. But you're seeing you like having a win over somebody like that is a huge deal, right? Getting a win over Hugh Freeze. Hugh Freeze has done nothing on the field. Like Auburn is like 16-26 or something like that in their last 42 games at home. They are really bad in terms of like what they've been able to do in riding the ship and righting the wrongs of Brian Harsin. He has figured out, it seems like, nothing on how to move forward. But the reason why they brought him there was, one, listen, he's a great recruiter. Look what he did at Ole Miss. And now NIL is legal because at the time, one of the ways she was getting those kids at Ole Miss was not exactly, it was, pre-NIL, NIL. And that's fine, not judging for that. But now you bring him into a situation where all that's legal and you have resources around him at Auburn where they're going to pay a ton of money. If you talk to anybody in this industry and you ask, like, hey, who are the teams that are consistently paying the most for players right now in this day and age? Texas Tech is a big one. Oregon, Ohio State, Auburn, Texas A&M, Texas. Those are the names that continuously come up. And Auburn, especially in the last two classes, has put a ton of money into their resources in backing, trying to find not only players in the portal, but also players out of high school. So when you have somebody that's a self-proclaimed QB whisperer and one of the best recruiters we all thought in this league, and you go beat him for somebody in his backyard, like Landon Duckworth, that's a massive recruiting win. And that like it's big to land anybody over that guy anyway. Doing it to a player that's in his backyard, man, huge. So I think what that does from an optics standpoint is now you're sitting here and you've watched this slow build with Shane Beamer and what he's been able to do with his staff, his players, and the development of this program. And now what you're looking at is saying, okay, hold on. Beamer struggled year one a little bit, but actually, or not year one, but he struggled early on a little bit. The first time they really had expectations when he, after the year and going into 2023, after the way they closed out 2022, they finally had expectations going that season. They went 5-7, not that great. Then they come back in year 4. He's in a year where people think he's in the hot seat, even though anyone close to the program will tell you he's not. His offensive coordinator's on the hot seat. His defensive coordinator's on the hot seat. Like all this weird stuff from the national media that clearly weren't paying attention. Now you have grabbed the attention of the national media, national fans, and most importantly, the attention of national recruits, top 100, top 247, top 300 recruits across the country, at not just in your backyard, not just in your region, but all around the country. And now winning something like this, where you're like, hey, not only did we go out and beat out Lane Kiffin, and they were going to be throwing some money at this kid, but then we went into Hugh Freeze's backyard and took Landon Duckworth. And I just think that, like, I'm not saying this is a negative for South Carolina. I'm telling you this from like I said this earlier. It's from a point of ignorance because I don't know what the NIL total is. I will do my best to continue to try and find out what a rough number on that is. But what I can tell you for sure is the numbers I know about at Auburn from just being around that state and covering the sport closer to that program for before I started covering South Carolina. At Auburn, I know that they're spending upwards of 11 to 12 million before the House settlement deal. Okay. 11, 12 million before that. Then I also know that they are going to be spending more than mostly anybody in the next couple of years because they are trying to right the ship after the Brian Harsin thing. I know what they tried to spend on Lenore Sellers, which is over 2 to 2.4 million. And I know that they are making this kid a priority. Now, saying all that, being able to land this kid, you just think about all the different narratives that South Carolina constantly has to go get past or unfairly labeled with. It's the weirdest thing. You guys told me about it when I started doing this job. It's the weirdest thing. It's so bizarre and inaccurate and wrong, and people just love to lean into it. It's a 7-5 team. They're not going to do this. They're not going to do the Beamer's overrated. Lenore Sellers is only a good running quarterback. It's like all the dumbest crap. Well, now you have once again put yourself in a position to not only defeat those narratives, but then change those narratives moving forward. And I think that's one of the coolest parts about watching a program take shape, and especially in the early stages of it. I don't know if Shane Beamer's ever going to win a national championship. I don't know if he's going to compete for a college football playoff spot this year or an SEC championship this year or next. I don't know that. I think he will. I think he has the capability of doing all those things. But what I do know is that the building blocks of a program that I have watched firsthand, you have watched firsthand, whether it be with Saban at Bama, Kirby at what do you call it, at Georgia, and it doesn't have to be just those nationally big schools. I mean, look at what Sarkisian has started to build at Texas, and then just other successful programs. You don't really want to throw this out there, but Dabo at Clemson and what he was able to do. Those are all different, unique situations. But my main point is you saw the start of those programs and how the foundation that was laid. And what was it? It was starting to really make a change in how you were going about stuff from the previous regime, figuring out ways to keep continuity in your staff, people to buy into your culture. It's check, check, check. Then you start getting some wins in recruiting, check. Start continuing those wins in recruiting, check. And then you start seeing it transfer over to the field where you don't necessarily bust through right away. I know Saban went to a national title, won a national title in year 3 and was 12-0 in year 2. That's Saban. You're not going to have that, right? But you start seeing Sark is a perfect example that's similar, in my opinion, from a coaching standpoint to Beamer, because Sark has way more resources than Beamer will ever have. Anyone who has the job at Texas will have more resources. But when Sark came into that position as the head coach, I remember him talking about this at one point during media days, and he was talking about his roster, and he was like, listen, I love explosive plays. I love offense. I love calling plays, all that kind of stuff. But when we got to Texas and Austin, our roster we had 19 receivers and 8 offensive linemen. You can't build a team off that in the SEC. You can't. So trying to figure out a way to start changing the culture, changing your roster, and implementing all the stuff that you want, and also that is a winning formula for a program. Beamer's doing all that. And this, as small as it might seem to just land a 4-star quarterback, landing a kid like this is one of the things that could vault you to like the next chapter or the next step or stage of building this program. So that is all for today's episode. Join us tomorrow. We're going to talk a little baseball portal. Listen, the baseball shows haven't done super well. I know you guys are itching for football and all that kind of stuff, but South Carolina, as it stands right now, has the best portal class in the country. We give Palmineri and his staff a lot of crap for how bad the season was. They're doing a lot of right things right now on the trail for the portal as well. So make sure you join in for tomorrow. Until then, we will see y'all then. I think we're going to head out somewhere downtown in the Vista today, or maybe 5 Points and get some dinner. And then, see what we see since we're back in Columbia, South Carolina for the weekend. Appreciate y'all. Love y'all. And go Cox.